Hey guys, Khadroth again. So, this has been a much requested topic. I've decided I'm going to go ahead and go through with it. That is to say, I'm going to make a video talking about the 5-star version of MASH. And needless to say, this is going to be at least controversial for me because you guys know I don't normally like to cover spoilers, but there are certain things like this that I consider to be practically unavoidable. You're going to be seeing MASH in content in the future. People are going to be talking about this. It's going to naturally be a thing. And to be fair, I've long held that character releases are usually not a avoidable spoiler at that point. That is to say, they're going to be everywhere in everything that you do. So in that regard, I think it's perfectly fine to cover this, but I will try to shy away from avoidable things like the story relation to any of this and such. So as a result, I'm just going to focus on the things that you guys need to know, particularly why is MASH getting a 5-star? So obviously this is something I've predicted for a long time. I think just looking at this from a purely gameplay standpoint, this makes sense. And we've kind of already seen the writing on the wall for some time. MASH had already been, as of leading up to Ordeal Call, a level 90 in terms of the actual level that she was. She was still a 4-star in terms of her capabilities and her classification, but now the devs have decided to actually make her a true 5-star. The good news is it's coming in the form of yet another outfit for her, so that means she does get a whole new brand new set of abilities, a new noble phantasm, but it also means that you can pick and choose when you wish to swap her back. Obviously, there's probably going to be story content that locks her into the 5-star version, but other than that, you don't have to worry about it, and you should be able to just change her back should you not desire the changes present here. And the reason I'm saying this is because the first change that I have to mention with regards to MASH is going to be the fact that her 5-star form now has a party cost in relation to her. So as you go to use her 5-star form, you're actually going to notice that she now has a 16 party cost, just like every other 5-star in the game. So that is obviously a controversial thing, given that MASH's real claim to fame for a lot of this time has been the fact that she is 0 party cost. So she was a free unit everybody had. She fit into literally every comp that you wanted to do, especially if you needed party space to be able to carry another like CE or something. So it worked out really well for her. But now with her having a full-blown party cost, just like any other 5-star, that's going to cause some issues for things. Particularly is going to be the fact that you're not going to have another, 0 cost unit to maybe throw into your backline. So at that point, you may have to consider dropping down to 5 units if you're going to try to run her alongside a bunch of other 5-stars with several other 5-star CEs. Party cost could become a major issue. Or you may just decide, hey, you know what? I'm just going to keep her as a 5-star, but I'm going to try to maybe work in other units that are maybe lower rarity to cut down on the party cost, or, again, same thing with the CEs. So you do have some options here, but this is definitely going to be one of the biggest changes that's obviously going to affect people. Obviously, we do get a increase to MASH's stats as well. We're going to get an increase of her attack power all the way up to 10,835. That's definitely much better than she used to be, almost a 1,000 increase. As again, I think this is just a nod to her upgrade in rarity. Same thing with her HP. You're going to get about a 1,300 increase all the way up to 15,528. So again, a nice tanky upgrade for MASH, and certainly a welcome one given the fact of MASH being sort of the premier defensive unit in the game in a lot of ways. Now, the interesting part about this that we can see is she does also get a new attribute as she changes into her 5-star form. This is going to be something you may want to take note of. Once she's in the Paladin form here, aka her 5-star form, she will become Man attribute. You can read into that all you want. I'm not going to say anything otherwise, but regardless, it does at least mean that you may be able to take advantage of this at times if you play smart. Looking at her star absorption, star generation, NP charge attack, NP charge defense, death rate, and alignment, nothing changes. Everything is the same. With regards to her gender and her basic traits, that's all the same as well. However, she will have a new trait that is Defender in her Paladin form. So again, another additional sort of feature being added here with her as a 5-star. Obviously, her deck is going to retain the sameness that it always has. It's obviously been, you know, a decent deck over the years, double Buster, double Arts, and Quick. Nothing too much more to write home about in that regard. It's just serviceable. Talking about her actual skill set here, we can see that her first skill is going to be an upgrade basically from some of her prior variants, aka her original form and her Ordeal form. Instead, you guys can see that this one is going to increase the party's defense for 3 turns by 20%, charge the party's NP gauge by 20%, and increase her own attack by 30%, as well as increase her own critical damage by 30%. This is actually going to help Mash quite a bit because this is going to give her the offensive firepower that she needs, which is going to matter because that is what the devs have been pushing her towards all these years. As you guys have seen, her original form was extremely defensive. Her Ordeal form lost a lot of the defensive capability in favor of offensive capability and maybe crowd control with the double taunt. But now you see, here we go with her first skill, the defensive capability coming back. And this was a criticism of the Ordeal outfit, is that when you had her locked into that form, you didn't have necessarily that actual like party-wide capability to take hits anymore, and so this definitely is a good thing here. But it's also being coupled with maybe the offensive advancements of her other forms. Her second skill here is an interesting one because it has 2 different variations of it. So the first form of it is going to be basically something that's going to grant the target of her ability Solemn Defense, aka Anti-Purge Defense, for 1 turn. Everybody else in the party will be granted invincibility for the remainder of that turn. So given the fact that Mash will have a taunt, you can definitely taunt herself and then pop this skill on herself in order to gain the Solemn Defense stack and take the hit. Or you could potentially try to set it up where somebody else takes the hit and you put it on them. Because the issue at play here is this is also a targetable charge, and it's an upgrade from her prior forms that used to only grant 20% charge. Now she can grant a target 30% charge. It will have some decent, you know, multiple use applications, but also be able to be used in her own favor depending on the situation. So again, another skill that allows you to shift what you're going to do with it. The cooldown on the skill is 8 turns though, and that's pretty hefty, though now, at least with her 5-star form, you can get Mash's coins, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a bit. The second state of this second skill here is going to be something that basically will replace it after you use Mash's Noble Phantasm for the first time. You see, Mash works sort of like Aoko now in this new 5-star form, where her first time she NPs, it's an Arts Support NP. The second time she NPs, it is now going to end up being a Buster AoE NP. So basically, after you NP the first time, this second skill will change. It will change into a variation that grants Holy Sword charging status, which is going to be an interesting effect. And what that's going to do is that is going to allow her to fire off her Noble Phantasm as again, Buster AoE, but it's also going to increase her own NP damage for 3 turns by up to 100%. This is definitely going to be strong, especially when coupled with somebody like Oberon. You're going to be able to get a lot of amplification out of this, and so Mash, even though she's a shielder, which is definitely more of a defensive variant on things and neutral against a lot of enemies, will still be able to pack quite a punch in a lot of scenarios. She's also going to have the capability to charge her own NP gauge by 4% per critical stars held. That is to say, at a maximum of 50 stars, she would charge herself 200%, meaning you only need 25 stars to make her charged up to full, or again, you can reduce it based off of the amount of charge that you need. This is going to be very interesting depending on who you're running alongside of her, because obviously a lot of art supports don't have things like a star bomb necessarily, but Buster supports do, and that is definitely something that Mash will be able to take advantage of. This is yet another interestingly enough smart star skill that's going to allow not even the consumption of the stars necessarily, but just the ability to make use of it. Obviously, the consumption of the stars is going to be a factor, but if you're already MPing that turn, it may not be the biggest issue. And given the fact that you do have numerous ways to generate stars in a composition for Buster, just make sure that you time this skill well to get both the maximum amount of charge, but also the maximum amount of stars, so that there maybe can still be follow-up crits. Again, as you look at something like this, that is going to be the demerit to it, is that it will consume up to 50 stars. The good news is it won't consume more than that. So if you manage to have something like 60 stars or 70 stars or even more, Mash is only going to take the 50 stars from that. So that'll leave you a little bit left over there to maybe crit with. It's also going to deal 2,000 damage to herself as a demerit. That is the other downside to the skill. So just be very careful about that. However, it can't kill you, so you don't have to worry about it too much. Just understand this is going to be a similar effect to the likes of Koinskaya or Black Grail. Whenever you have them equipped, they're going to drain. So having a healer alongside Mash may be a very smart investment for yourself and your account in the future. Though admittedly, unlocking this will be very deep into the story, so most of you guys should have something like that already. The skill still going to share its 8-turn cooldown. Basically now we get to the third skill, and the third skill will have a 500% chance to draw attention to herself for 1 turn. Now, you don't have to worry too much about this. It's just your standard taunt skill. Obviously, things can interfere with it, but it will basically just taunt everything for 1 turn. It's also going to increase her own NP generation rate by up to a whopping 400%. So definitely a nice upgrade there. And certainly this will allow her to generate a lot if you're going to, say, use Mash's arts cards in the same turn that you're going to be popping this. Doubly so if you can manage to get some arts crits off, she can definitely loop with something like that. Granting herself on activate defense buff for 3 turns is the next effect here, which will gain critical stars whenever she takes an attack. So you can use this maybe the turn before you're going to pop the second skill in order to help you generate even more. And again, the amount of stars is 10 per attack. So definitely something that you can obviously abuse depending on the situation. The skill only having a 6-turn cooldown is certainly nice, as if you do manage to try to set up Koinskaya systems or something like that, you will at least have the ability to get back to this depending on your situation. Her passive skills are going to stay the exact same. However, she is going to gain 1 new addition. And that new addition is significant. It is actually one of the chief reasons to use the new form of Mash from both an offensive and a defensive standpoint. This one's going to apply more on the defensive side of things. This is Territory Defense C. It's going to grant Mash a passive buff that will give her 5 stacks of this territory defense. The territory defense will limit the party's damage taken, except for herself, to 1,000 when the incoming damage is above 1,000. Now, this is significant from the standpoint that this just hard limits the amount of damage that a party is going to take in the short term. This means front-loaded fights are going to be far less lethal if you have Mash in the party. It does not matter what form you have her in. As long as you have her in her 5-star variation, you will gain this passive. If you try to put her in a 4-star one, though, you will not, so keep that in mind. However, the interesting enough way that this works is that it will block any instance of 1,000 damage with a couple of exceptions. The first being if, say, you would have had 1,000 damage, but maybe defense adjustments and damage cuts reduced it. Then it will not take a stack here, as long as it's below 1,000. The second one is going to be basically with regards to any sort of indirect form of damage. So things like a tick from your own Black Grail, things like dots from an enemy, those things will not count for this, which is honestly probably a good thing, given the fact that it would just erode the stacks really quickly and annoyingly. And from there, any form of invincibility or evasion can also prevent the actual damage output, which means that this is a smart passive, and so it won't consume the stack if you manage to have those effects already in play. So it definitely helps out because it knows whether or not the damage is being mitigated in any form. Again, the issue that you're going to have with it, though, is going to be that it is very specific in the way that it works, in that if you do try to revive or something like that, you will not gain back the stacks of this. It's very similar to how craft essences work. You're not going to be able to, how should I put it? You're not going to be able to like gain any sort of stack back through alternative means like command seals or anything like that. So just keep that in mind, that that is going to be the hard limitation of it. And again, this reduces every form of damage taking, including Noble Phantasm damage. So someone's about to hit you with a really high octane Noble Phantasm. If Mash's passive is in play, it's only going to do 1,000 damage to the party members. The key here, though, is that it's except herself. So be very careful. If you don't have Mash protected, Mash can still go down because this passive will not go into play on her. So keep that in mind, but it is at least a interesting passive. I've seen a lot of takes on this already. People are both on one side feeling like this is overpowered. People are saying this is going to make the game too easy. And on the other side, people are like wondering, you know, why they even needed to put this in and like what this is even about. I'm going to tell you at the end of the day, this is a nice passive. It definitely will, to some degree, make faster, more front-loaded fights easier if you're running Mash in her 5-star form. However, it's not going to trivialize everything because these 5 stacks can be eroded multiple times per turn and can go away very quickly. So it's not a blank check to just write yourself all the way to the end of the quest. It's definitely going to cause problems in battle if this wears off and you're not prepared for it. So just keep that in mind, as that's going to be one of the biggest things with her. Her pins are now unlocked for her. She does have the pretty rare anti-extra class attack damage aptitude, which affects all extra classes, including Beast. So this is actually a really good third append for Mash. Second append being mana loading is certainly obviously going to be viable for you for trying to get to a Noble Phantasm faster, but depending on the composition that you're running, you may not care about it too much. And the fifth append skill, reducing her cooldowns, can definitely have some really good effects given the long cooldown nature of her skills already. So I already mentioned this before, but you can now get Mash's skills. In fact, that's where the footage in the background that you're seeing right now is coming from, is that it will all come from basically that sort of content. And essentially, there are 2 new quests out there that you guys can do. They are one each in Camelot and one in Lost Belt 6, basically in Camelot in Lost Belt 6. So right at those 2 nodes, you're going to be able to find a new quest once you've completed Ordeal Call IV that will allow Mash to be able to go in and get coins. You will have a one-time reward that will grant the coins for you. However, you will not be able to just infinitely farm it for coins. The way it works is there is the one-time reward, but there's also going to be challenges basically for you to complete. Some of them honestly are pretty easy, and others are honestly kind of just annoying. Particularly the second set in LB6 has some pretty annoying mechanics if you're trying to get it all done in one fell swoop. So understand that there is some issue with trying to get the coins, but it shouldn't be impossible by any stretch of the imagination. It just might take you some time depending on what you're doing. With that in mind, there should be enough coins between that and being able to bond Mash all the way to bond 10. That's right, Mash does actually manage to have a bond craft essence. I'm not going to go over it too much here, other than to say that it is a very nice craft essence, especially as we consider things like the Grand system coming further into the game. That is definitely going to be a consideration for a lot of people. You can also grail your Mash now, so that is definitely another thing to take note of. So basically, everything that you could do with a normal unit minus burning her, which I don't know why anyone would want to do that, basically you can now do with Mash. So they have totally unlocked Mash. They've made her own proper unit in that regard, and she is free. She is still a free 5-star. You don't have to gacha for this or anything like that. So it's definitely nice. You can definitely bond grail her all the way up to 15, get more coins from that way. So you should have enough coins to be able to do everything that you want to do with Mash in that regard. Now let's take a look at her new noble phantasms. That's right, plural, as in 2. So the first one is going to be, like I mentioned before, the Arts Support NP. This is going to reduce the party's damage taken for 3 turns. It's just a nice damage cut. It's not a hard damage prevention like the passive is. And it will grant the party debuff immunity 1 time for 3 turns. This is also really a nice and probably underappreciated effect down the stretch here, is just her ability to grant party-wide debuff immunity is going to be solid. It's going to increase the party's attack by 30% for 3 turns in addition, and if threat to humanity enemies are alive on the field, it will increase the party's NP damage further by 50% for 3 turns. This is definitely an interesting thing. This is going to make that check and then just give it to everybody, and all of this is basically just a solid sort of continuation as it gives the 3-turn duration. However, it's also going to grant that Holy Sword charging buff for 3 turns that will change basically the NP into her Buster AoE NP. And it's also going to change the second skill, as we mentioned before. Furthermore, the NP will reduce the cooldown of the second skill by 5 turns. So this is going to make it a lot more doable, but this will make you probably want to run some form of cooldown reduction with relation to this second skill, given its 8-turn cooldown status. Even if you're running something like the 5th Append, the 5-turn cooldown reduction plus the 5th Append giving another turn, you're still looking at basically 2 turns of cooldown that you kind of need to make up. So running someone like Kyrielight in there in the party composition can definitely help things out. With regards to the overcharge effect of the support NP, it's also going to further increase the party's defense for 3 turns by a whopping 30%. So again, it's a very nice, very tanky sort of skill here, or NP here, and it is going to allow you to have that staying power, but also set you up for her Buster AoE NP. So now let's go ahead and let's talk about that. Her new Buster AoE NP that'll be available for 3 turns after her Arts NP will be a 5-hit Buster AoE, as we already mentioned. It will ignore invincibility for 1 turn before damage, ignore defense for 1 turn before damage, deal damage to all enemies, deal 200% super effective threat to humanity enemies damage, and then remove their buffs afterwards. Now you might be thinking, oh, well, that sucks. I wish the buff removal was before. You're not really going to care because of invuln pierce and defense pierce happening before the damage goes out. So unless the enemy is running solemn defense, it's not going to stop you from being able to pierce it. And frankly, solemn defense on enemies, at least at this point in time of the recording, has not been a very used mechanic by the devs for obviously enemy composition. We'll see in the future, maybe they might start to employ that a little bit more. Her overcharge effect is also going to be a damage increasing one. It's going to activate first before the damage goes out and increase Buster performance by 20% for 1 turn. So this will impact not just her NP, but also any additional Buster cards. Doing a triple Buster Brave Chain is now possible with Mash and will allow her to Oonga Boonga quite a bit more and quite a bit harder. So again, the damage here is going to be really, really solid in a lot of ways. Now on screen, you guys can actually see we've got 4 different scenarios laid out for you guys in terms of how Mash charging is going to work. The thing you guys need to keep in mind is that Mash is not going to be capable of 3 turning. This is the same issue that Aoko kind of has with regards to her performance as well. Whenever you have a support MP that needs to go off, you're going to have to use that before you can get to the offensive Noble Phantasm, which means you need somebody to kind of handle wave 1. So it just is going to be the way it is. Basically, your first scenario here is going to be a 1/1X node with Mash having Append 5. And what we're going to utilize here is basically Mash is going to get off her support NP wave 1 and then her offensive NPs wave 2 and wave 3. And you can see she'll start out with a maxed out mana loading, but also her 5th append. So that's going to be a little bit of a requirement issue there. And then basically as we look, you guys can see we're going to pop 50% charge for Mash because again, her first skill gives 20%. Her second skill is a targetable 30%. So we're going to use that all on herself to bring her up to 70%. We're then going to end up using Phantasm Moon at that point to grant her an additional 30%. And that should be enough for her to pop her Noble Phantasm. But you can definitely see that we're going to utilize the skill 2 on someone like Arc. So this is maybe going to require, again, some sort of offensive output from some other unit. From here in wave 2, we're basically going to go ahead and utilize Arc's 35% charge at this point for Mash, and then also 70% for Oberon. And sorry, I didn't say this, but turn 1, you need to have absolutely done Mash's support NP in order to have converted her here. So then this is going to bring her up to 105% charge for wave 2, allowing her to fire off her Noble Phantasm the first time. The third wave is basically just going to be Mash popping her skill 2, which is going to grant her a ton of charge at that point due to the stars that are rolling around. Plus, we're going to go ahead and utilize the skill 3 from the New Year's Mystic Code here in order to allow her to get a little bit more out of this. But again, that's going to be how you're, at least one scenario of how you can make it through a node with Mash and a support. Same thing here, only we're going to be utilizing an X1X node, which means this is just a scenario in which we don't care how many enemies are in the first or the second, or sorry, the first or the third wave. We're just going to be making sure that we have somebody around to be able to handle the middle wave here. But either way, it's not going to matter too much. So again, you guys can see this will be utilizing normal Arcuid, a Kyrielight, and an Oberon here, with the Kyrielight providing 50% charge to Mash's 50% there, wave 1, bringing her up to full. Make sure you pop all the Mash skills first, though, in order to gain the cooldown reduction from the Kyrielight. From there, you're going to go ahead and fire off the support Noble Phantasm, find some other way to get through the first wave there, probably Arcuid herself. And then from there, you're going to manage to essentially utilize Arcuid's third skill, basically her charge skill that's going to help charge again any of her allies that have the Millennium Castle battlefield buff. That's going to give Mash 55%. Also on top of that, you're going to go ahead and use Oberon's 50%. Now that will have a drain effect, but it's not going to matter too much. We're going to fire off Mash's Noble Phantasm in this wave, clearing out wave 2. For wave 3, even though we had the Oberon drain, we should still have the stars. We're going to go ahead and pop Oberon's 20% charge plus Mash's returned skill 2 in order to allow us to have the capability to, again, charge ourselves there, committing to the 3-turn scenario. In the third scenario here, as you guys can see, we're going to have a 1-1X node with Append 5 again, but this one's going to be utilizing someone like Khadroth here to take out the first wave, alongside, again, sort of like the Halloween Mystic Code here to grant additional charge. So from there, same sort of setup, Mash starting out with the maxed out mana loading, but also remember the Append 5, her utilizing the 30% charge on herself, but not necessarily her 20% yet. From there, we're going to go ahead and be at 50%. We're going to utilize the Kyrielight 50% charge skill in order to bring her up to full, to get her to her support NP. We're going to have Khadroth fire off her own NP that turn and have it handle the wave. And then from there, you should end up in wave 2 with Khadroth having died and rotated the party. So that's going to bring in Oberon, but we're just basically going to go ahead and utilize this Mash's skill 2 at that point, granting her even more capability in terms of charge. That's going to get her 184% due to all the stars abounding. And again, from there, you're going to go ahead and fire off the Noble Phantasm as her Buster AoE version. Next, in turn 3, we're going to utilize Mash's 20% charge skill from her first skill there, Oberon's 70% himself, and 10% from the Mystic Code to bring her up to full, and that will complete your 3-turn loop. The last scenario is another X1X node, and this one's going to be utilizing similarly Khadroth again to handle the first wave and kill herself. You're going to have the maxed out mana loading, but no fifth append being required necessarily for this one. Mash going to use all of her charge skills on herself to bring herself up to 70%. Merlin is going to be in the party now as a 30% charger. He'll be able to complete that 100% charge there. You're gonna have Khadroth handle wave 1, but make sure you put Mash's support in P first so that you can make sure you get it off and convert her into Buster. Turn 2 here, you're going to go ahead and utilize the Kyrielight 50% charge skill. That'll also reduce the cooldowns. And Oberon's 50% charge skill. That's going to bring her up to full, allow her to fire off her Buster Noble Phantasm. And then in turn 3, we're going to go ahead and utilize Oberon's 20% plus Mash's skill 2 again to get her 96% in terms of this and allow her to complete her 3-turn loop yet again. So again, you can see Mash can handle a wide variety of nodes. If it's X in the requirement, it just means, hey, that can be any number of enemies, including 3 at that point. So you can see Mash is going to be a very, very capable unit. The question is, are you going to be able to have the party structure for it and set things up right? And so this was just us trying to give you a couple scenarios that we thought could work well. Let's take a look at Mash's actual damage numbers now. You guys can see here, this is basically just Mash under her own power with her self buffs. This is going to allow her at least some capability here to really pop off against threat to humanity enemies. But the issue is going to be if there's a threat to humanity enemy, as they are fairly rare. Even certain things like end singularity bosses don't always qualify, so it is the way it is. But you guys can see even just her normal self-buff numbers, these are actually pretty insane neutral numbers for her. And it makes sense because Mash is just always going to be neutral as a shielder, so nothing really too much to write home about that. You don't have to worry about effectiveness. But yes, obviously at this point, we only have Mash at NP3, so this is something to consider as we look at these numbers, just where Mash is, but where Mash might go if eventually the story decides to give us additional copies. Taking a look now at Mash in a proper composition here, we're going to be utilizing Black Grail. That is going to be the recommendation to run on her just to maximize her amplification. Again, running someone like Oberon with her due to the amount of NP damage up that she has, being able to double that, it's going to result in some pretty crazy numbers. And you guys can see that on screen as we've plotted in NP3 here with Merlin, Kyrielight of Light, and obviously someone's got to handle wave 1, but heck, you could make that the Koyan or the Oberon or somebody like that in order to do it. Taking a look at this, you guys can actually see just the raw firepower here. Again, still neutral numbers, but 192k there without man attribute coming from Kyrielight or threat to humanity, which is definitely going to really amplify things. Remember, threat to humanity as Mash uses her support Noble Phantasm will grant the party 3 turns of NP damage up. So that's why you see threat to humanity wave 1 none, threat wave 1, and then both basically coming in here for some of our damage output. But again, by the time you get to wave 3, the damage amplification just spikes to crazy numbers here. As you can see, just the sheer impact of Oberon plus all of that stacking NP damage getting doubled. And it just results in some pretty absolutely fantastic numbers to see. It's wild. I never thought we would see Mash getting numbers like this. Just keep noticing that, again, this is definitely uncharted territory for FGO in this regard. I'll be curious to hear you guys' thoughts and what you guys think of Mash's new upgrades. Let me hear your thoughts below. I'll try to keep spoilers to a minimum, but again, I thought this was a really welcome and deserved upgrade for a long time here coming. So anyways, thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I will see you guys for the next video later. Hey, if you liked the video, make sure to like and subscribe, right?